Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Irish Goodbye podcast. Here we are in episode 3. Irish Goodbye podcast is a podcast dedicated to people where we speak to them about their real lives, real ambitions, how they navigated their life, and how they got through. We're not necessarily talking to the C-suite or magnates of industry. We're talking to real people who held down real roles and have real nuggets of wisdom to help us all through. And today I have an extra special guest. He's been a mentor of mine. He's been a hard mentor. He's been a tough guy, but he's also been one of the best people I know. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing my father. Maurice, why don't you say hello to people?
Hello, everybody that's listening, and I'm sure there's quite a few known Carl. And I'm in my 80s now, and it seems a very, very short trip to your 80s. Goes very quickly when you don't want it to. And very much so, the older you get, the quicker it goes.
There's no wisdom straight off the bat. So, well, why don't you tell us a little about yourself, Maurice? Tell us about, obviously I know your career took you from working in newspapers to the rag trade to sales and construction. So give us the little bits of the highlights or the lowlights that you want to share.
Well, not to make too big a long story of it, my first job from school was in the Irish press as a copy boy, and then a reader in the reading room, checking out mistakes before the print was put into the newspaper. I did that for 2.5 years, but the money wasn't great, and I went to work with my dad in the building. My dad was a house builder, and I worked for a couple of years with him and enjoyed the building and enjoyed working with him. But being a family business back in the old times, I had a brother that wasn't too fond of work, and I ended up doing the work for two of us and getting paid the same as Brian. So I thought there's got to be something better than this. So I ended up in London for a couple of years with a girlfriend of mine who later became my wife, Colette, and we lived in Croydon. And I fell back on my building experience and got a job as a painter with Woolworths. And Woolworths had so many stores over the UK that we went from store to store, painting the ceilings, doing up the manager's office. And I discovered after a year with them that if you could hang wallpaper, you were paid nearly twice what a painter was paid. And my father had taught me how to hang wallpaper. And I became a wallpaper hanger for Woolworths, getting twice what I was getting as a painter. And after 5 years, myself and Colette came home. We got married, went back to the UK, to London, and in the next 6 months got all our gear back home and came home for good. And I did the painting, back to the painting for a while, working for myself. But again, didn't like the work. And I always had a hankering for sales. And I managed to get myself a job in the rag trade. Now, although it was a selling game, the rag trade wasn't an easy. I didn't find it easy because you were dealing with women all the time, and they were a lot tougher to deal with than men, I found anyway. But I hung in there and got good experience. And one thing that shone for me was that the maxi coats came into fashion in the 1970s and or late 60s, early 70s. And I talked my boss into using all his old cloths, and he had reams and reams of cloths that weren't very good saleable cloths, and anything he made in them didn't sell well. And I said, well, young girls with maxi coats, they won't care what the cloth is. So we made all these old materials into maxi coats, and I took out van loads, rang friends of mine and got all the girls I knew, say in Dunleary, or girl that worked in an office to get all the office girls, and I sold van loads of maxi coats, and I became very successful. And while I was working for them, I was approached by two very good friends of mine who had been very successful in business, Alan Pilkington and Billy Begley, and they started a business called Hire All Services. And that was purely hiring materials and machines and lawnmowers and all that type of thing. But they had an idea of going into sales as well, and they opened up a higher all sales division. And they asked me would I come in as their salesman, and I did. And again, found in my natural stride, loved the job, found it easy to sell, partly because I was always a good talker and also a good listener. But I found that customers liked talkers because some customers didn't have an awful lot to say and they liked you to do the talking. So you had to learn where you're talking too much to a man, or had you got the guy that wants you to talk a lot.
Right.
So while I was working for them, I was into my second year with them, and I saw a job advertised, and it was a job for Black and Decker Power Tools, which I later found out was actually an American company, Black and Decker, and also owned DeWalt, which was a big range of tools as well. But Black and Decker in the UK wanted a rep to cover the whole of Ireland, and I applied for it. And I was brought in for an interview, and I was told that there was over 100 applicants, and it may take a while to get through them. But I was called in for a second interview. I was thrilled with myself. But then all of a sudden, nothing. And a month later, I heard nothing. So I assumed, bang, that's it, it's gone. And out of the blue, I got a phone call from a gentleman in Glasgow to know whether I come over for an interview in Glasgow, and it was Black and Decker. And I flew over to Glasgow, and when I was sitting down talking to three different men that were in the room, and this guy, Jonathan Weeks, said to me, you haven't asked about the salary, Maurice. And I said, well, I haven't been told I have the job, so I didn't think, I thought it'd be a bit of a neck to ask what the salary was. I thought it was just as another, oh, he said, Ron Woodall not tell you, we picked you, you have the job. And I said, no, I haven't been told I have the job. But I went, my job was higher all sales. I was on the magical 1,000 a year, which doesn't sound an awful lot today, but in 1968, 69, 1,000 a year and a company car and expenses was a very, very good salary. It was the magical 1,000 a year. And I went from that 1,000 a year to 3,500 annual salary with Black and Decker, and twice the allowances for hotels and all, because I was paid on the same rate that men working in London or Birmingham. And
Right.
Of course, hotels were far more expensive in the UK. So I ended up in a fantastic job with an awful lot more money than I ever earned. And if I was asked what was the best selling job I ever did up to that point, was selling myself to Black and Decker, getting that job. That to me was an achievement.
I love that you say that, and I love that you still remember that. You go over and you didn't have the job, because obviously I'm asking you some of these stories that I'll have heard before, but people who will watch this haven't. And because of you telling me that story, probably when I was going for the job at Oracle in Dublin back in 2011, I won't take the interview unless I know the salary. Forget telling me the job. I won't take the interview. Right? So, it's lovely getting those learnings. And that's why we do this, that it's because I want people to learn from people like you. We speak a lot about this, and the products change, but sales is still the same. As you said, some people want a talker, some people want a listener, but you have to know who wants what.
Well, an answer to that would be that times have changed greatly. One of the blessings we had when I was in sales, and we'll go on to other jobs I had, but one of the blessings was there was no mobile phones. So when you were out on the road, you were very much allowed to do it your way. You weren't in contact every 5 minutes with somebody. Somebody couldn't just interrupt you halfway through a sales pitch. I used to have to come out in the evening time and ring my office to know was there any messages for me. And I often had rows with the guys in offices when I come back to the office, because I'd find out that while I was on the phone, nobody told me that a particular customer was looking for me, and I probably had passed within 10 miles of his premises on the way back, and I'd have missed that call. But it was a blessing not having mobile phones. But I remember when mobile phones first came in and getting the first one in my car, that was a blessing as well, because it brought a whole new array of fabulous chances and openings to us, you know?
Yeah, it's true. I think mobile phones and the constant connectivity and access we have to other people has taken the planning out of life. We used to be able to plan. Like, a simple example of my own life is, obviously, Ian and Derek and, all my friends growing up, and Tim. We'd all arranged to meet at the number 7 bus, the left body bracket 5 to 8. And we knew that we were the 5 to 8 7, and we'd all be on that bus. Whereas now people are texting each other up until 10 o'clock trying to figure out where they're meeting and why they're meeting. So you used to be able to plan a whole lot better. But look, as we go on, your career went from sales, and then we can skip through some of the sales stuff because we will revisit it in questions. But one of the things I want to get to is you set up a construction company that I worked for. So I know you can talk about how having lazy employees has affected you badly, because I was one of them. So tell me about how you went from being a sales rep in a role where you had to responsibility to respond and report to people, to then going and being the desk where every decision stopped at. How did that change your mindset, and how did that kind of make you feel, one, vulnerable, or two, empowered?
It's a mirror image, isn't it, Carl? I mean, if you think about when you're working for somebody as a salesperson, you're looking constantly at the person that you have to be when you own the company. Because I had bosses telling me what they wanted and what way they wanted it, and you naturally said, yes, sir, definitely, sir, 3 bags full, sir, and you went out and did it your own way, because they weren't always right. And I always felt that I had some very good bosses, excellent bosses, but I had excellent bosses that were telling me how to sell, but I knew they couldn't sell. And if they went out and did my job, they wouldn't have been a good salesman, but they were an excellent sales manager, because they knew all the ins and outs of the product. They knew more about the product than probably I did, but they knew the business structure as well, and they could guide people. But that doesn't make you a salesman. And I remember one boss I had, and he actually taught that if you got people with degrees, you'd get great salesmen. And they were the worst salespeople we ever saw, because people with degrees were trained for something else. Not sales, to me, is a natural ability. It's something that you want to do, you have the ability to do. And sometimes I don't even know the full talents I had in sales. They came out naturally. One of them was that you were good at talking. The other one I found was if you could tell a good yarn, a funny story, you could break the ice with people. If you had somebody laughing once at a sales meeting, you knew you were on a winner. Yeah, I felt that anyway.
I couldn't agree more. There's a level of comfort for somebody to smile or laugh within a meeting, but also you have an innate ability, and you've carried this all the way through my life as I've seen you, have an innate ability to make people feel immediately comfortable and immediately welcome. And that's not natural to everybody. So I do think there's elements of sales you can learn. I've been lucky enough to have sales training at Oracle, at Salesforce, and some of it's really been powerful, but some of it is a reinforcement of being human and being yourself, and making sure that there's a part of your personality in your sale, and not just being a robot or a clone that a company can pump out and you all achieve the exact same thing. If that was the case, there wouldn't be commission-based sales, because we'd all be pulling in the same orders.
Yeah, that's very well put, because if you break down sales, sales is every part of your life. It's part of your home life. It's part of your growing up. It's part of your children. Because I broke the ice with many a man over getting a good order, because I took time to find out a little bit about what he liked, whether he was married, whether he had family. And if, for instance, I had a man that had a son that was very sick. And I remember going in the second time and asking him how his son was. And he was quite taken aback that I remembered that he had a sick son, and I asked after his son.
Mhm.
And that's just something that I wouldn't have been surprised if he had asked me the same question, because that's the way we were.
Yeah.
Um, I found that my clients, my customers, helped me as much as I helped them. And it was a two-way street, very much a two-way street.
But that's still the case. I have customers now that will go and find out things for me. Like if there's going to be an issue getting a project done, they'll bring the information to me early because I've earned the trust with them and the friendship. And same thing, you'll know if their daughter's graduating, or if you know one of their children isn't well, or if you just know that they're going on vacation and you remember the next time you see them, say, well, how was Spain? Like simple things like that, because it's a natural interest in the human. But that's the bit I don't think you can teach. And that's, if anybody takes anything from this conversation, is try and be more mindful to do that, because I saw you do it and you excelled at it. And it's really helped me in my career. The other thing you did that you excelled at is, before you set up your own business and you're working for Black & Decker, you used to drive your car onto a car ferry on a Sunday night and go to England and drive the length and breadth of England and come back on a Friday evening. And you would, myself and Brian Pennells, who I know you know, we spoke about this in a previous conversation. You gave me the ambition to know that the town I grew up in or the county I lived in wasn't the coordinates of my career, that my career could be anywhere in the world, because when I was a child, my father was going off to work and went to a different country to do it. So thank you for that. But tell me.
I never thought of it that way. And I see it now that it was what you're doing on a smaller scale.
Well, it's I think as big a scale, because getting to America back in 1974 wasn't an easy task, right? Where getting to England wasn't easy. You were spending 4 hours on a ferry. I'm only spending 6 hours on a flight, but tell me how it felt to get on a ferry on a Sunday, other than the joy of leaving your kids back in a different country. Tell me how you felt going off and working away from home all week. Was there an adventure to it, or was it sorrow?
It was okay during the day when you were working, because you were tied up in what you were doing and you were meeting new people. It was very lonely when you went back to the hotels at night, particularly when you were a family man and you had a wife and kids at home. And I used to ring Colette every night, but it was lonely. And anyone that thinks, oh, it must be great to be eating out all the time. Eating out is all right when you're eating out with friends or eating out with family. But when you're in a hotel for 5 or 4 nights a week, it's not great. I didn't think it was great.
I agree. Just sitting at the bar alone, having a soup and a sandwich can be it can taste like ashes, because it's a lonely meal, and then your hotel room can feel like a prison cell after 2 or 3 nights.
Well, I had a way of getting through nights, and I never sat at a bar on my own. I might have one drink before I went and had dinner. But what I used to do is I used to find where the local cinema was. And I'd go to the cinema. And then I'd come out of the cinema and I'd go and have a late meal and a glass of wine or two, and then go back to the hotel and go to bed. And it filled out the night great. But if I met somebody I knew, which I got to know other salesmen and that on the road, if we met, if you went in and found 2 or 3 of the reps you knew in hotels, we'd end up having dinner together, maybe have a few beers or a game of cards,
Right. So I know I sent you a few questions, so I'm going to throw the first question that you picked out, which is, if your career was a pub, what would it be called and why?
Well, I thought about this, and there was one. I often actually thought of having a pub.
Well, we did for a little while.
And at one point I suggested to Colette that I would open a wine bar in Dalkey, and I have this idea that a wine bar would be very successful in
Yeah.
Dalkey. And in fact, there's one in it now, and it is quite successful. But if I hadn't opened a pub, it would have been called Wheels or Stroke Betsy. In other words, to do with cars, because I always thought an ideal pub was where a man could come and have a pint and talk about his car, not his family, not his wife, not his job, but his car, because I felt most men were like me. I adored cars.
Yeah.
And I can remember every car I ever owned, and I can remember every car I ever wanted to own. So it would have been definitely Wheels or Betsy. Was a lot of us called our cars. It was always she. The car was always a she,
Absolutely.
and it was always Betsy or old Bess or whatever.
Yeah.
And my Volkswagen, my first car was a 1951 Anglia, and it was Betsy.
Very good. Well, look, you might have got your wine bar in Dalkey, but we had one in New York for a few years, so you got your wine bar in New York.
Yeah, well, that was thanks to you, and that was very enjoyable times as well. In fact, I missed that place. It was
So do I. So look, getting back to career-wise, when was the first time you realized you're doing something meaningful rather than just showing up and getting a wage?
Well, the biggest, I'll go back to the time I said to you, the biggest achievement I felt in my younger days, because I'm trying to think, 1970, 71 was when I got the Black & Decker job, and that would have been, I was 28. I got married at 24, so I was 28 when I landed the Black & Decker job, and that felt like I really had arrived. That to me was every bit as good as in my 50s when I started Fireman's.
Yeah.
But I got a great kick out of the Black & Decker job, because once I was in that job for a few years, I was actually headhunted. It made me realize you've arrived, Maurice, because I had companies approaching me to know would I work for them. And that was when I wasn't even looking for a job. And that was a great feeling. That was a great feeling.
And with that, look, you've mentioned the family and you've mentioned mom a few times as well. So can you just tell me, personally for you, it doesn't have to be any great existential thesis on this, but personally for you, what did it mean to have a supportive wife back in Ireland who allowed you, I don't mean allowed in a sort of custodial sense, but empowered you to go and take jobs where you'd spend 5 or 6 days a week in a different country, or empowered you to go from 1,000 a year to 3,500 a year, but she knew there'd be sacrifices on a personal scale. So what was the family unit? What was the support like from
that? The family unit was great, because being away for a few nights, and mind you, some weeks it might have been only 3 nights, and the weeks I was working in Ireland, it could be as little as 2 nights or 3, or I could be away Monday and Tuesday night, come home on a Wednesday, be away Thursday night and back home on a Friday. But the going away to England, there was always a great feeling. It was a lovely feeling driving the motorway back to the ferry and getting on the ferry in Holyhead and knowing that in a couple of hours I'd be home. And it was lovely, because it was great warmth to walk into a home where you were loved. And it was a lovely feeling. Mm. But then to have a really good couple of nights out with Colette, I think it enhanced your marriage. I think being away from each other for a few days like that really enhanced the marriage and enhanced the feeling of love. I think so.
There is a flip side to that, because I remember being such a little shit of a kid that you come in after 5 days and you'd be told to give me a talking to, because I had been a shit for 5 days. That happened more than once.
But everyone I knew had kids that were little shit for a few days. That was part and parcel of having kids.
Right, so look, I guess so. You say Black and Decker's when you realized you went from having a job to having a career. How did that carry through again to then running your own business and being the boss and being the one who, that the book stopped here, because that has to have the I'm not just showing up. And for those who don't know, Maurice had a construction company called Fire Rains. And I worked there. My brother worked there. My sister's partner at the time worked there. You provided income and family support for 15 different families, probably 20 different families over a sport. I was there for 12 and a half years. So
19 years it went.
19 years. So look, tell me how, because you can't just be showing up when you're the boss. So tell me how you went, and you especially in the moments of doubt, well, right? Because we all have those moments of imposter syndrome or doubt, or where you're dealing with a huge construction company like Sisk, and they're trying to bully you. How do you stand your ground, and how do you know your worth? Because that's something I've learned from you, and I'd love other people to hear it.
You must remember that the progression into starting Fire Rains, I didn't have much choice. No. I was in a very good job in Waven Plastics, which is a very big company in Ireland, a Dutch company, and there was redundancies happening, and I was a high-earning man of 50 years of age, and we had a new boss that decided that he could get reps to work for half the money that 50-year-old salespeople were working for. So we were all hit with this redundancy. And I was lucky enough that I was personal friends of the financial director, and he had worked in a company with me before, and he warned me that I wouldn't be made redundant that year, but the following year I could be facing redundancy. And he gave me a great package. But I found myself out of work and working for myself at 50, and I started to work on a commission basis for a friend of mine that had a fire protection company. But he was a man that was always greedy. No matter what you did for him, you didn't get your fair share of what you made. And I just felt, I have kids at college, I still have a mortgage, I have a home, and my back was to the wall at 50. So I decided, if this guy can run a company like that, why can't I? So I started Fire Rains, and I was very surprised at how quickly it took off. I just had to toughen up, Carl. You say to me, how did you suddenly become to a boss? I remember a story that came out a couple of years later, and you'll remember this well. Steve, our director in Cork, that ran our Cork company, used to talk about, geez, you don't want Maurice to come down here, Mr. Big. If he comes down here, all hell will break loose. And nobody knew that I was 5'5". And the way Steve spoke, I was 6'6". And but
still are on the phone.
Sorry,
you still are 6'6" on the phone.
But I was able to blast my trumpet over the phone, and I often remember you telling me that some of our customers came back and said, my God, Maurice gets very hot and heavy, because my attitude was, you don't come telling me what standard of work you want and what you want here and what you want there if you're not paying the bill. And we all work for a living, and we all have to earn a living. And if your clients are not paying you, that's certainly not a position for them to be in to tell you what way they want the work done. 100%. So I toughened up, and I found in a case that one thing that my father always told me, respect has to be earned. If you show people respect, you get respect back. Don't expect respect from somebody that you don't respect. And that was the way I was reared. So I felt that everyone that worked for me deserved some respect. And even that, the lowest of the low guys we had working on site, they got respect until they didn't deserve it anymore. And any of them that deserved it, always got our respect. And I
Absolutely.
felt that maybe we got a little bit better out of men by respecting them.
Absolutely. I mean, you told me two things. It's only two things you have to give them away. It can never be taken from you. It's your word and your pride.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you live by that, you can never be tripped up. So that brings me on to the next question, Dad. You're talking about that resiliency of kind of being forced into owning your own business. And I know there's more to that and it goes on a lot deeper, but is there a belief or a mindset that guided you through those tough times, whether it was leaving and or being made redundant and starting up the construction company, or maybe leaving the rag trade and taking that leap to go into something else? What's that mindset you've always kept with you?
Well, the mindset of I can honestly say that Colette probably had her feet more firmly on the ground as we were rearing our family, because a couple of times I had ideas to go out on my own, and Colette held me back. She felt that the safe road was the better road than the windy side road. And now the windy side road could have ended up back on a motorway, but she wasn't willing to take the risk. So I had an opportunity at one stage with Black and Decker to go to Nairobi for a year or 2 years to train people there, and I was talked out of it by Colette, who didn't want to do it at the time. Then in Wavan, I was asked to go and live in the UK for a couple of years and try and enhance the business over there. And again, it was an opportunity, but it was one we decided we wouldn't do. So there was always that. When I did start Fire Rains and was successful with Fire Rains, I certainly many of the time thought back of only I'd done this 20 years ago.
Well, I have to say, look, knowing your mindset, growing up and watching you, and I don't think there's anything you would have done that you wouldn't have been successful at. You're that kind of person. I pull my ambition from you. I get my confidence from Mum because she was always there. Every time I came home from a shitty day or a good day at school, or whether I lost a rugby match or won it, Mum was there, and she was there to pick me up or celebrate with me. You gave me the ambition to go out and try, and so I don't think had you gone to Nairobi or gone to the UK, you would have been a complete success. I know that, and I think you do too. So cheers to you on that. But what's your ultimate cheers to life? Like, just in the greater scheme of things, what are you happiest about? What are you most proud of? What are you most content of? And what are you happiest about?
I quote my father on this. My father one day said to me that he was going to a funeral, and I said, "Oh, a friend of yours died?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "A man had died, and he was 58." And I said, I being 17 or 18 at the time, said, "Well, he had a good innings." He said, "You won't think that when you're 55." But he said the man. He said the man had a great life. He said he died at 58, but he said 2 months ago, he said, I was at a funeral of an 88-year-old man. And he said this 58-year-old man lived twice the life that the 88-year-old man. And he said if that 88-year-old man had lived to 100, he still wouldn't have matched the life that the 58-year-old had. So my cheers to life is that I'm in my 82nd year, and I couldn't have packed any more life that I wanted to do into it. I haven't wasted any years. I don't feel I've wasted any years, even down to being a painter. I loved every minute of it. I earned money. I don't think I've ever been idle. I've never been out of work.
No.
And I always found that even when I lost a job, and during my sales career, I had about 8 or 9 big selling jobs, but I had lost jobs and I could have been out of work for a couple of months. I wasn't out of work. I took Colette's car and I went down the country and sold on commission and made quite a good salary working on commission for people, because I had that belief in myself. And if you believe in yourself, nobody can stop you. Nobody.
I love that. And that's something you instilled in us. I got my first part-time job at the Door store, which was part of the companies that you work for. I was 12 unpacking doors off trucks. So I don't think I've ever not had a job since the age of 12. It's something I'm very proud of. And like you, I can't sit idle. I'll always have a side project or something going on. And look, it's
Well, if I can interrupt you there,
please, it's about you.
One lovely funny story about that particular time when you were coming down to work at the weekends in the door store. I had yourself and a couple of your pals down, and I had the Dublin brass, and you were boxing the Dublin brass for me, the knobs, the knockers, the Lions Head knockers, and the different Georgian knockers for doors, and it was been putting them into beautiful boxes with Dublin brass, and the brass was made in India.
Yeah, yeah, I remember.
We were buying it in from India and putting it into made in Ireland.
I mean, Tesla are doing the same now. They're buying all the parts in from China and putting together in America and saying they're made in America. So look, just before I ask you this last question, Dad, I'm going to thank you. I'm going to say to everybody, they say don't meet your heroes. I grew up with mine. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you for sharing a little bit of your wisdom. Thanks for instilling the drive that I have.
Well, thank you for being so successful and telling me that I had something to do with it, because I think you picked up the baton and you did the last lap on your own. You've been fantastic and well done.
Well, thank you. So the last question we ask here on the Irish Goodbye is, if you were to write in the back of a napkin to leave on some wisdom on the bar for the people coming behind you, what would it be?
That's a tough one, and I've thought about that, and I think I would stick with again, going back to my dad, something he told me, and what it was, but he said, don't forget you are equal to any other man. And he said, it doesn't matter what his profession is, what his job is. He said, we're all equal. And he said, I have seen inventors and surgeons hanging on every word that a plumber was telling them when he was doing work in their house. And what I would write on that napkin is, whatever you want to be, have a go at it. Have a go at it. And don't let anyone tell you that you're not good enough for that job. You're the only one that'll ever find out if you are or you're not.
I love it. Dad, thank you.
Okay, son. And listen, take care of yourself. And cheers to everyone that might be listening or might see this. And I hope they learned something from it.
No doubt they did. Right. Talk to you soon, Dad. Love you.
Okay. God bless.